Good evening, everyone. Yesterday there was an article about priority sector lending rates, right? So we have briefly discussed what is priority sector lending rate. So this is a technical definition. Even this is not 100% accurate as per technical definitions, but the simple prelims questions can be for scheduled commercial banks on foreign banks up to 20 branches with up to 20 branches. If you cross 20 branches, that is difficult. But if the banking is up to 20 branches, you have to give 40% of their loans to specific sectors. So that is the core concern of priority sector lending rates. But when it comes to regional rural banks, understanding sake, what can be priority sector areas? As all of you can see, agriculture is a priority sector area, self-help groups and joint liability groups. Yesterday I told you, right? Self-help groups, bank linkage program. In the same way, joint JLPs, JLGs, joint liability groups. So what is the advantage of self-help group and joint liability groups? That means if any one individual in the group is not productive or proactive, the rest of the group will push him to work harder. Or if there are genuine causes, they will contribute on behalf of him or her. For agricultural infrastructure, small and marginal farmers, MSMEs, ancillary units means like small cottage industries, all rural based activities, small activities. Okay. Next, export, education, housing, social infrastructure, and recently government has added renewable energy. Recently, government has introduced renewable energy under PSL lending, and also startups up to 50 crore. That is also priority sector lending rate. See, priority sector lending rate is to boost loans to that particular sector. So, startup and renewable. So, our startups. This is some can also be given loans under priority sector lending rates. Okay. So just briefly keep in mind what is priority sector lending rate. It's an evergreen static topic with current affair applications. So it keeps on evolving. It keeps on evolving all the time. Next, anti-defection law was in the news. Anti-defection law. Have you heard about it? What is anti-defection law?
If a person leaves one party to another after elections.
How many schedules are there in Indian Constitution? How many of you know all the schedules? So how many of you know 7, 8, 9, and 10? And 11 and 12? Because there is no such thing as 13 schedules. In Indian Constitution, there are only 12 schedules. So how many of you know at least from 7 to 12? Think about it. All of you know all? No? Obviously, it is written there. 10th schedule is anti-defection law. It's written on the board. So no confusion there. 7th schedule, we have different union list, state list, concurrent lists. Okay. 8th schedule is languages. 9th schedule is it's a list where central government laws and state government laws are kept to protect from judicial scrutiny. But in reality, after 24th April 1973, that is the day on Keshwan and the Bharti judgment, after that, whenever something is put on 9th schedule, it can be judicially reviewed. In IR Coelho case also, Supreme Court gives the same judgment. 10th one is anti-defection law, 11th one is panchayatis, 12th one is municipalities. Very easy to remember. If a question comes in this particular area, it will probably come in such lines. What is what? And 7th schedule is world famous, right? Every day we'll be discussing state laws, union laws, state list, center list. This is not our area. All the drama will be happening. Yes. Now, in the same vein, what is anti-defection law and why it is important? As the definition goes, it is a law created to punish members of parliament, MPs and MLAs for leaving one party to another. Okay, so is it wrong to move parties? Like, is it wrong to change parties?
Depends on the time.
It is not wrong, normally speaking. For example, if I'm a party member, today I resign Congress and join BJP, there is no harm in that. But if I'm elected as a MP or an MLA on the ticket of Congress or BJP, then I move to a different party without resigning from the post. That means MLA or MP. That is called as defection. So, for example sake, I'm telling you, a Congress party gave to ticket to someone. He won on the name of Congress. After winning, after becoming MP, he decided to join BJP as an MP alone directly, and BJP welcomed him. Okay, such thing is known as defection. There are 4 types of defections you need to understand. And anti-defection law is constitutional, right? It's directly in constitution. Apart from disqualification, okay, apart from direct disqualification because of defection, there are also other ways to disqualify. Representation of People's Act, okay, will contain the provisions on other ways of disqualification. But disqualification through anti-defection law has 4 major provisions. One is if a elected member voluntarily gives up, just now whatever I told. For example, somebody won on BJP ticket, joined Congress, the speaker can disqualify him. Okay, the speaker can remove him as a member of parliament or member of legislative assembly.
Is it the choice or he has to do it mandatory?
It's a discretionary power. The speaker has a discretionary power. We will discuss next point. Okay, and there is a provision called as whip. Whip means if a bill is to be passed by BJP government, BJP will appoint someone as a whip. He will say all BJP MPs have to vote yes. If any BJP member decide not to vote yes, okay, he can be technically removed from the party and the post. He will be disqualified as an MP or MLA. Okay, so going against the party wishes can also be grounds for disqualification under anti-defection. Okay, if there is no whip, I mean the party did not issue a whip, you can vote against BJP's wishes, but no defection. House also. We are discussing about disqualification from house itself, not from party. Okay, he will be removed from the house only as an MP or a MLA. Next, yes. That is criticism of anti-defection law. We will come to that in the criticism part. Okay, obviously that is antithesis to democracy, right? So that is biggest criticism of anti-defection law. It removes the individual voice and it makes everybody universally equal. Right. Next is okay. If someone votes against the party, he is not directly eligible for disqualification. The party should give him a fair chance to ask him why you voted against the party wishes. If the party wishes to disqualify still, then he can be disqualified. Next, a independent member. If someone is elected as a independent member, then he decided to join a political party, he can be disqualified. Okay, if an independent member joins a political party, he can be disqualified. What is the logic there? Sometimes, let's say BJP is there. BJP did not give ticket to X. X is a very local popular MLA. He will go out and stand as an independent. Okay, he won the election. He became MLA. Then BJP will accept him to join the party because he's a winning horse. Okay, so such independent members should be disqualified. It should not be supported. But the twist in the tail is this particular MLA, let's say I need 50 seats. BJP have 49. He is independent. He can support from outside. He can go to the governor and say, we are joining forces. We are collating. Okay. He will become kingmaker. Yes or no? he will be given the cabinet post directly. MLA will be made into cabinet member, cabinet of the state assembly, right? So that means because I'm supporting you from what side, you all needed you is one seat. So that one seat will become gold. You must have seen such scenarios, right? Let's imagine BJP have 49, Congress have 49. Whoever he supports will be kingmaker. Then he will demand 500 crores, 1000 crores, and parties will give because you are about to form a state government, right? Or portfolio. I should be made deputy chief minister, and I need 300 crores. And they will seal it. They will think it as a steal deal. They will think the parties will think it as a dead cheap deal. Yes or no?
Yes.
Farming farming power is 10 times more costly, right? Again, if you fail, then what will happen? Hunger governments will be there. Lot of drama will happen. Okay, so that is the loophole there. Okay, next is nominated members of the political party after 6 months. If someone is appointed as a nominated member, after 6 months, if he joins a political party, that is crime. But before 6 months, he can join. If Sachin Tendulkar is nominated as a Rajya Sabha member, then he decided to join BJP. No crime. But after 6 months, he should be disqualified. Clear? Okay. Now, who should decide that? The presiding officer of the house, that is either speaker or chairman, should decide. The biggest loophole here is just like the Manmohan Singh joke, no time. No time has been mentioned. That means somebody complained. Example, imagine and Congress. BJP won, right? After winning the elections, a Congress MP decided to jump into the BJP. Okay. He is an MLA. So Congress will obviously complain to whom? To the chairman or the speaker that this person has jumped from one party to another party. He is eligible for disqualification. Then what will the speaker doing?
Considering
Actively under consideration. Okay, normally speaking, whichever party is in power, the speaker belongs to the same party most of the times. Okay, so there is no convention that we will make the opposition party member as a speaker. Okay, so the speaker belongs to political party. He in this case, example wise, BJP. The MLA jumped from Congress to which party? BJP. Will the speaker take the decision? No. He might sit on it for 5 years also. Okay, this have actually happened. Not only this, the worst thing is such kind of MLAs were even made cabinet ministers. Okay, ideologically, no. No. Right? Speak. Congress go to Supreme Court. Because, but if the state it's not defection, he is not disqualified. Then, but first of all, speaker won't. This is how anti-defection law is being misused by almost all political.
The speaker should have the decision. Otherwise, they can't go to.
You cannot go to Supreme Court. See, this Parliament, SMP, BJP, Congress MP moved to BJP within the Parliament itself. Okay, so whether he is disqualified, yes or no, should be told by Speaker. Only when I give the judgment, then you can bring in Supreme Court or High Court. Okay, till then you can. On what basis will you go? For example, let's say how wife and husband are fighting. Okay, you are the father-in-law, hypothetically. If they you can hear them fighting in the room every day, but as long as they act good in front of you, you cannot ask what is happening. Yes or no? Only one of them has to come out and complain like this is happening. Then you can mediate, or else they will say what is your role here. Exactly in the same way. I mean, I have reduced it to a layman level, but for simple understanding, Speaker of the power of the speaker is paramount. It is also a constitutional body, right? When speaker has a constitutional role to uphold, okay, Supreme Court cannot come and say you should do your job. That will be injustice to speakers. Clear? Insult to speaker in a way. Okay. All right. So we have understood till that particular point. Now, as single thing, which it doesn't have any loophole.
Yes.
Where we doesn't have a loophole. So again, loopholes are not created by accident. Loopholes are there by design.
Intelligence.
We think the fault in the design is an accident, but the fault in the design is by default. They planned it. They wanted it to exist. As long as they want it to exist, you can find loopholes. So just like the tax laws, why are tax laws so confusing? It is because of the income tax commissioners. They will be happy, and the chartered accountants, they will be happy. Yes or no? If normal people start understanding what is tax laws, why will we need all those people? Right? So you understand, right? So everything is by design, not by accident. We think, if I know that there are so many loopholes, don't you think all the lawyers in the country know that? Parliamentary members know that? They know. But why are they not working on that? They want that loophole to exist, because tomorrow I might be in power. Tomorrow Congress will be in power. They will capture BJP MPs. Yes or no? Okay. Right. Okay, so seeing all this drama, Supreme Court recently got very frustrated, and it said to a one particular Manipur minister, you don't please attend the sessions. Okay, Supreme Court waited. That case have gone on for like 3 years, 4 years. Then Supreme Court got really frustrated. Then it used the power called as Article 142 to do complete justice. Article 142 is a very powerful section in the Constitution which gives unlimited powers to the Supreme Court. Okay, it can enter into any territory and do any kind of suggestions to do complete justice. The provision itself is known as complete justice provision.
That is not a suo moto.
Suo moto means taking case on my own.
But other restriction, like it can do anything.
No, that will be judicial overreach or activism. Criticism will be there. For example, National Food Security Act is there. If it is not being implemented, Supreme Court cannot say add this clause. It can say there are flaws in National Food Security Act. What are you going to do about it? Then government will file a counter saying we are going to rectify it like this.
So even in this case, we should ask the speaker or chairman what are
Here, if it uses 142, it is God. It's like cheat code, right? God mode.
Doesn't it like make separation of powers very low level?
So that is what I'm saying, right? If the parliament or the assembly have the common sense to fix that loophole, all you have to do is to fix the loophole is insert a sunset clause, something similar to a sunset clause. Sunset means automatically after 3 months you have to give a judgment. If a speaker is there, today you went and said this particular BJP MLA defected or Congress MLA defected. From the date of complaint, 3 months from that, 90 days from that particular complaint day, you have to compulsory pass a judgment.
Time limit.
Time limit. It's a simple one line addition to the entire anti-defection. Now the speaker has to give a judgment, yes or no, within 90 days. If he does not give a 90-day judgment, then Supreme Court can intervene or High Court can intervene. Something like that can be added. Yes, something must. It's a simple common sense thing, right? But why is the state or center not doing the same? Especially Parliament not doing that?
Why would they make laws
They need
to
that.
Political will, lack of political will. So that is why we are violating the separation of powers. Okay, who is giving opportunity to the judiciary? Judiciary is taking it, or
executive?
executive is giving you opportunity
Executive
to
is giving it.
That's as simple as that. It's easy to blame judiciary, but at the same time we have to blame the parliament. And anti-defection law was not passed in 2020 August, and we are saying in 20. In 2021, we have to go, 2021 August, if anti-defection law was passed, and in 2021, if we are finding all these loopholes, then if Article 142 is being used, then we can definitely say it's judicial overreach. Okay, but we had more than 15 years or 20 years of time to rectify all these things. So separation of powers is though not justified, but there is no other option but to think.
This article 142, is there anybody or anyone to check it? Because this gives the power to do anything, whatever they wish, and it can lead to extreme overreach. So is there anyone like maybe president or something?
No, I think it completely depends on conscience of
Judges.
the CJI.
It's like, have you ever played video games? You must have played video games, right? There is a cheat code, God mode. Once you enter God mode, you cannot die. Yes or no? You cannot die. You can jump any high. You
Best
can.
example is leave me alone.
Is that no? So Article 142 is more or like God mode. It can literally do anything and everything. But Supreme Court should and will use it very sparingly. It does not use it in every case. It uses very rarely, but recently it has started increasing the dose of Article 142. Right? So in that case, Speaker should take a decision on anti-defection within 3 months. So that's an important thing we need to run. 3 months is pretty decent time, right, for a Speaker to do defections, because we are undermining the democracy. And most importantly, people are also not bothered. Yes. Why? You cannot. Governor is outside the domain, right? Governor is outside the parliament. He's only good for autograph. My autographs. Though he forms the assembly, yes, he's good for autographs. So he does not have any role.
Not involved any issue in this type of.
Just like president is part of parliament.
Governor is part of autograph. Yes, the assembly. But still he doesn't have a role, right? Yes or no? He doesn't have a role. Yes, please.
Let's say, suppose they form the majority government, and after that, a few members shift from that. Now, they not have less seats, and yet the speaker is not giving any decision. How do they form?
Okay, so I understand. Let's say Congress of 50 MPs exactly. The majority is 50. Okay, so they formed a government. Now 46 are there because 4 has defected. So it is a minority government. It should collapse actually.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what about this 4?
Now they shifted it. The speaker is still not giving any.
Uh-huh.
How do they form government? They don't have the majority.
So it is a responsibility of the opposition to have a floor test. The opposition will introduce something called as no confidence motion. Okay, then Congress will go for no confidence motion. Okay, then BJP is supposed to bring 50 MPs or 50 MLAs and prove in the floor of the house, not in resorts, not in governance residence. In the floor of the house, it has to show I have 46 plus 4, 50 MPs. If it fails to do so, if it is only proving only 46, then the government can be called as a collapsed. It collapses, right? You don't have majority. Okay, clear? See, that is why parties should breed, or parties should take care of its politicians in such a way that they will always stay with the political party. In that sense, BJP is very loyal. For example, if you take Kishan Reddy of Hyderabad, he was in the BJP from last 30-40 years. He did not change party. He was always like, he was there. He was waiting. He was made a cabinet minister now. So when party rewards loyalty, people will stay in the party. But right now, people change parties like shirts. Okay, they don't have any ideological inclination towards the party, and parties are also not respecting intra-party democracy. If someone spent 40 years for you, you should reward him loyally. Yes or no? So if parties don't have that common sense, what can anybody do? So defections are a outcome because of lack of intra-party democracy. Then election commission said, we will be the boss, we will be the deciding authority, in defection cases. President and governor should also hear defection petitions. So a lot of recommendations were made by a lot of people, whether election commission should deal with the defections or governors and presidents should deal with the defections. If governors or presidents are made, again they are appointed by party in power. Most probably party in power. Will they take any decision? The same drama from speaker we have moved to governors or president. Instead of that, one suggestion was Election Commission of India should have more powers. Okay, but the thing is, Parliament is a legislative body, Election Commission is an outside body. So you are giving the functioning of this to somebody outsider. So this is not recommended. The simplest thing to do is add a timeline to speaker. You have to give whether positive or negative, whether right or wrong. Right? If you are forced to give a decision, automatically you won't have any option to hide behind it. Clear?
Those quasi-judicial bodies are set up by Parliament.
Which one?
Any quasi-judicial body.
For example, a finance commission is a quasi-judicial body. It is set up by constitution itself.
Then this water sharing tribunals. Here
That
Supreme
is
Court
also
suggesting,
Article 262.
and this here Parliament is suggesting an independent tribunal to be set up by
Independent
Parliament.
But again, see what Supreme Court said in Tito Holan versus Union of India 2002 case. Okay, is when a speaker is taking a decision whether it's a defection, yes or no. Okay, he's like a judge. Whenever a speaker is taking a decision, he is thinking like a judge. So he's a quasi-judicial body in that particular moment. So automatically there is already a quasi-judicial body. That is why Supreme Court can intervene in Supreme Court or High Court after the judgment is passed. Okay, whenever somebody takes a decision, judicial like, automatically he's a quasi-judicial body. There are tribunals which are set by Parliament. Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. Yes, CAT. CAT is a tribunal. Central Administrative Tribunals. SEBI we can have appeal tribunals. Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. Like this, all tribunals are set up by parliaments through acts. They are quasi-judicial bodies. Clear? Yes, please.
So when the student takes a decision of yes or no, he doesn't take it on his own judgment, but based on what is happening over there, he's bound to take the decision in favor of what he thinks.
That is in theory. Like if the MLA defected from BJP and Congress, it's as clear as the sky. But still, the speaker have a discretion to say it's not defection.
Okay, so he has some
Discretionary powers. Clear? Right. So this is one more article in today's Hindu about by Shiv Shankar Menon. Shiv Shankar Menon is a very famous personality. He's a good writer. He's a former national security advisor. Right now, Ajit Doval's position was occupied back then by Shiv Shankar Menon. Okay. So it's a pretty simple and straightforward article. I think we have discussed it multiple times in one way or the other. What Shiv Shankar Menon and the others called as non-allied movement 2.0 is nothing but strategic autonomy. So we may choose to call it in different names because of domestic complications or domestical obligations, right? Simply put, the present establishment don't want to be appearing like a Nehruvian ideology, right? So they don't like Nehru, they don't want to use the Nehruvian language, so they call it as strategic autonomy. And they can add some masala like strategic autonomy because of changing obligations. Okay. So if you read this article very carefully, there are a lot of keywords to pick up. So first point is they have written a new report. Okay, and the report says your external relations is not separate from your domestic politics. When your domestic trajectory is going in a northward direction, your external relations or a nation's growth will also grow in the northward direction. You cannot have a south trajectory policy in the country and expect the country to grow up north in economy wise. It goes hand in hand. So simply he's saying focus on important aspects rather than on all unnecessary activities. Clear? That is point number 1. Point number 2. We need not follow China blindly. We need not follow China blindly. And there is no international order as of now. Everybody is playing for himself. If you look at the WTO article in the Hindu, right down there, okay, there is no one independent body. When after World War II, what happened? Western countries became very powerful. They created Bretton Woods twins. What are Bretton Woods twins?
It is a new economic order, like promoting capitalistic economy and mainstreaming dollars.
Who are Bretton Woods twins? IMF and World Bank. IMF and World Bank are called as Bretton Woods twins. Okay, so this is also linked to Washington Consensus. Recently, Washington Consensus is being replaced by Cornwall Consensus. Okay, just remember the words, at least if you don't know what they mean, don't worry. Right? So Washington Consensus or Bretton Woods twins is a Western ideology. That means after World War II, America became so powerful that it became the sole superpower of the world. So it created two institutions, IMF and World Bank. What do they used to do? They used to give loans to developing nations, and they decided the trajectory, how to grow, how the world should grow, who should get the loans, how they impose democracy. For example, 1991 reforms and all these things. What was the condition for IMF or World Bank to give more loans to developing countries like India? You should open up the markets, right? You should go for e-governance. You should go for good governance. So these are all clauses added by the Western developmental models. And till 1991 or 2005 also, the world did not have any other option but to depend on these major groupings. Only in 2004, 2008, global crisis has happened. The power of USA came down very heavily, and there was no alternative power center. And by that time, small countries like India, BRICS, and Brazil, everybody was growing. So from 1947 till 2008, America dominated in a very nice fashion. Yes, 2008 global collapse happened. Small countries like India, Brazil, or other developing countries started growing up. That is when China grew much faster. You understand the story, right? Very simple story. That is exactly what he's talking about. Okay, right now what is happening in 2020, if you see, we don't have a single power center. In trade, everybody have their own grouping, ASEAN, RCEP, TPP. Yes. In security, everybody have their own understanding. UN Permanent Security Council is no longer relevant. Nobody respects it. Yes, AUKUS is there. Shanghai Cooperation Organization is there. China-Russia coalitions are there. RIC is there. Like this, everybody started forming their own bilateral, trilateral, multilateral groupings. But global order, there is no global order, either for world security or for world trade. And that is a problem. You can see Myanmar. Have we discussed Myanmar recently in last 1 week? No, right? I haven't discussed as far as I remember, because nobody is bothered about what is happening to Rohingyas in Myanmar. Afghanistan also, if you notice, slowly died away. People gave up on Afghanistan. Nobody is discussing Afghanistan. With AUKUS, Afghanistan discussion is gone. That is a master stroke of USA. Think about it logically. Yemen civil war, Syrian civil war, we are no longer discussing. Climate change also, the negotiations are very subtle. For example, net zero emissions is slowly moving into the back pages. We are not discussing it in the mainstream. We have accepted that both people will die and climate will die. Yes or no? So till then we have to do some time pass, right? So we are discussing in the name of AUKUS.
But for the World Trade Organization is working.
It's
World
not
Trade.
working. It has collapsed. I will discuss that article, right? I will tell you how it collapsed. Okay. Are we clear? So even World Trade Organization was also dominated by USA. Okay. Almost all the global organizations we know were run by these Western dominated countries. So all the developing countries realized if we have to play a game according to our rules, we cannot follow the old institutions. That is why everybody is happy to let them die. Clear? Right. Next, logically speaking, if you have to bring some coherence in global order, the only way is to reform UNSC. At least in theory, if it has to appear like there is a global change in global order, right? The only solution is expand the UNSC Permanent Council. But we don't have a consensus on expanding the UNSC Permanent Council. Trade also, World Trade Organization, again in that article we will discuss. Clear? So that is what he's discussing on how everybody is having their own problems and global order is going to dogs, and we will have small pockets of different coalitions, and the coalitions are also in a strategic autonomy of every country. When China needs something, China will negotiate with ASEAN countries. If India needs better security, Quad and AUKUS will help. Like this, everybody has their own arrangement and everybody is happy within their own pockets. That is a long-term problem for India.
So why only to regain a global order? Why only the move is UNSC revival? Why not develop a new pole, new power? I mean, like Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we can just like how US controlled. Of course, this some fantasy kind of thing, but why not? This is a solution.
See, everything we discuss is money. If US is superpower, it means it is pumping lot of money, right? NATO, 20 countries are there in NATO. Only country which is supporting entire NATO armed forces is America. So to be called a superpower, to create Atmanirbhar India, you need that kind of money where you will provide security for all ASEAN countries. All ASEAN countries, if you are providing security, if China is attacking them, I will protect you. Do we have that kind of money, defense capacity, submarines? You get the idea, right? To create a one aircraft carrier, we need more than 40,000 crores or something. Minimum estimate, I think it's more than that. Okay, like that we need 4 or 5. Okay, and it will take 20 years to construct. We can calculate the rest, right? So being superpower is not a easy thing. It's a huge amount of expenditure, revenue. Okay. Yeah. So what is the core thing I was saying? Yes, Atmanirbhar Bharat is very, very essential for India by using the strategic autonomy as very important factor. Next is very, very pragmatic and real suggestion. Issue-based coalition. They don't mindlessly join all coalitions. Join issue-based coalition. I have something you need, you have something I need. We will join the forces. No hesitation, no baggage.
Just like Quad.
Just like Quad or with France also. Recently, we are dealing very well with the France. Why? I need something you have something I need. Right? So as simple as that. So very pragmatic suggestion. See, again, compare this to Happyman Jacobs article. Happyman Jacobs article actually are not adding value to your overall preparation. Yes. Whereas Shiv Shankar Menon article is something in the lines we are discussing, and India should pragmatically do. Yes or no? What is the one thing that we will gain by militarizing Quad? We will lose everything. Yes or no? And finally, my argument, the same thing. Say, I don't want to compare like my ideas on par with Shiv Shankar Menon. What I'm trying to tell you humbly is a authority. He's considered like the #1 foreign strategy analyst in the country, and he's an expert on China apart from Jaishankar. Jaishankar is a authority on China. Next is Shiv Shankar Menon. Both of them have very good idea. And if you see any international relations book released in India recently, the foreword or review is written by him. If he gives his blessings, that means that book is good. So he is considered as authority in IR relations. And he is coming and telling you that self-strength is key. That is what we used to discuss. Whenever there is peace, in that peace, what should we do?
Empower ourselves.
Empower ourselves. Atmanirbhar Bharat. Grow as $5 trillion economy. The same dialogue, right? Why? It's pure common sense. Everybody will like you when you have money. Everybody will grow together when you grow. Yes or no? And that is what he's trying to say. So he more or less restricted himself with the IR calculations, but in the last line he punched very heavily by domestic trajectory. If we spend our energies on unnecessary stuff like communalization, weakening the nation, and all those things, okay, then we cannot grow as a nation. First of all, clean your house domestically so that you will become stronger. Yes or no? Apart from like UPSC discussion, normally asking you what is the threat to BJP in this country? Like what is one threat to BJP's power in this country?
Excessive communalism.
Forget like what BJP is doing. Outside BJP, tell me one threat to BJP's power. Think from south to north, all the 29 states, all people, problems, issues. Tell me one threat to BJP's power. Hmm. Well, okay, but do you think they have recovered pretty comparatively?
Yes, not.
Probably you won't win 350 seats, but you are not going to like not form the government. 275 is guaranteed, right? Even today, probably from 315 we will fall back to 275, but 275 is guaranteed. Yes or no? So what I'm trying to tell you is, except the self-insecurity of BJP government, there is no other threat. Rahul Gandhi, we don't want to make jokes. Yes, Prashant Kishore, all these people are not mass leaders, right? As long as they have Modi, the single biggest threat to BJP is its own insecurity. Okay? BJP has the unparalleled opportunity to do a lot of good for this country, and to be honest, they are doing 90% good things, but the 10% they do is like the dust on the mirror. All the good things done by them will be covered by the 10 things. For example, the Uttar Pradesh violence. They have done all the good things, but the 10% will cover them mask. And unfortunately, even they are obsessed with the 10% only. They are not projecting the 90% good things they are doing. See, again, 10%, right? You do a lot of things, but you are worried about the 10% image problem. See, it can be buried in 10 seconds. Yes or no? But you have a problem. Again, unfortunately, I think that's how nature balances itself. Everybody should have some flaw, or else it will be like God mode. Yeah. Clear? So as a nation, we are still moving forward. We can move even much quickly with less baggage, less historical baggage. We are carrying 1500 years of historical baggage. If we add wheels to that, probably we can go much further than any other nation. Very interesting article, very nice article. After a long time, I appreciated the article in Hindu in its entirety. Trade multilateralism at risk. So there are 4 concepts you need to learn. One prelims question only. World Trade Organization is a consensus body. World Trade Organization is a consensus-based body. That means if we have to agree on a certain agreement, all countries will have one vote, and every country has to say yes. It's not like majority minority votes. If there are 150 members, for example, all 150 have to say yes. Even if 149 said yes and 1 said no, that proposal will be halted. Okay, that is World Trade Organization's functioning. So what he's trying to tell you is, World Trade Organization is going to meet soon, but it does not have any long-term agenda, and we are not seeing a lot of support. Who is the biggest benefactor?
Yes.
The pattern of the World Trade Organization is US. Now US itself is not or no longer supporting the World Trade Organization. That is leading to a lot of problems of World Trade Organization. That is the first paragraph. Second one is appellate body. What are appellate bodies? Appellate bodies are like tribunals. Whenever you have a complaint or complaint, but it's stalling the appointment is taking over the power of the body. It's like having Supreme Court without judges. Class information thing, but you don't have judges. Then what is the point of having a Supreme Court? In the same way, we have WTO, but not appellate body. Then the problems are there. The next one is very important for India and for your prelims or understanding. Green box, blue box, and amber box. Green box, blue box, and amber box. There are 3 boxes. Okay. What this other challenges are discussing is about is called as peace clause. Other challenges paragraph is talking about something called as peace. Peace. Okay, let's say a developing country is there. Agriculture of that it should not cross % in subsidies. I can give subsidies to the farmers, and the farmers will produce goods, and the farmers will export the goods. I hope you understand. Farmers are producing rice. The rice is being exported, and I am giving a lot of subsidy to the farmer. That is why Indian goods become cheaper or appear cheaper. Think about it. If 1 kg of basmati is 40 rupees, it should be 50 rupees, but 10 rupees is subsidized by the state. So I'm able to sell it at 40% or 40 rupees. So if it crosses 10%, that is violating the WTO rules. Okay, you will learn about more in the economy classes. But simple concept is government should not give more than 10% of support to the farmers. In India, we are giving more than 10% of the support to the farmers. That is violation of WTO principles. So we did not go for the Nairobi commitment because we said please peace clause. Peace clause means indefinitely we stop at the 10% drama. I will give as much amount of subsidy I want to give to my farmers. Okay, till we reach the consensus, we are not going to proceed with the World Trade Organization. That is what India has said. That also is stopped. Okay. Next, the third point is subsidies to the fishing industry. Already fishing is over exploited. If we give more subsidies to the fishing industry, it will destroy the ecosystems. Yes. And last one is every country for itself or every grouping for itself. World Trade Organization is sidelined. CPP, TPP, RCEP, and all these bilateral, multilateral groupings are there, which are pushing away the World Trade Organization into something called as institutional zombie. What is zombie? Alive but dead. No, it's like a dead man walking. You must have seen Hollywood movies, right? Zombies. So in the same way, WTO is alive, but it is not working. So it's called as institutional zombie. As he rightly points out, India is not a member of RCP or TPP. So India is not member of any multilateral groupings. We are still member of World Trade Organization. So if India can proactively take the leadership and revive the World Trade Organization, it will benefit India more than any other country. For global large-scale development also, we need World Trade Organization and UNSC to perform in its entirety. See, one small thing you have to remember is every generation will forget the lessons of previous generations. We have to learn our own lessons. For example, 75 years ago, communalism happened, partition happened. That generation understood the power of hate. Okay, World War II happened, they understood the power of failure. That is why they have created UNSC. Right now, everybody is thinking we don't need UNSC or we don't need global peace. But logically speaking, after 1945, though we have multiple issues, we did not escalate it to the level of world wars because of UNSC to an extent. But at the same time, the same P5 members are the reason for all the crimes in the world. So how do we explain that conundrum? We are compromising for the small wars in place of the bigger war. We are compromising for American domination instead of total lack of world trade. And nobody can argue that World Trade Organization was a failure, total failure, right? At least developed countries were exploited, but they also grew to at least 1%. If India was not open in 1991, okay, do you think we would have the same kind of development that we are having now? We would have been further behind the China. Yes. So it depends on how you optimistically look at or sadly look at it. But the ultimate purpose is we need global organizations, but they should also work for the welfare of everyone. Because even now everybody with internet knows what kind of drama USA is saying. Earlier we don't know like how well the world was connected. Now everybody knows everything. Probably more Indians follow American news closely. Yes or no? Especially when Donald Trump elections was happening, everybody was an expert on US elections. Kids, grandsons, all those people were there in US, right? Whether they will get H1B visas, yes or no. So they have their own vested interest. So what I'm trying to tell you is the world can no longer be fooled by these Western institutions like they used to do in 1990s. So we need not worry, but at the same time, they should be ready to accept these developed nations or developing nations like India, Japan into the UNSC membership and give more power to us to grow. Then global consensus can be created. Yes. While America or China or Japan was declaring net zero, in the same line, if they added, we are going to transfer $100 billion to developing countries, nobody would have found any fault. But the thing is, I'm announcing my own moral lessons, but without any support. In the same way, if I say India don't give more than 10% export, I should also tell you that I will support you through technology or for better farming mechanisms or something. So you can transfer, right? So what will you do with all the hoarding? You get my idea? So the developed nations should also change to an extent and accept the new world order because there is no world order. Right? So that's the summary. It's a good article in relation to WTO. In the long run for you, especially UPSC, anything related to WTO is good for prelims and mains. So it will be wise for you to save this article.
Sir, you said boxes. Is it with respect to WTO?
WTO, it's official mechanism. Green, blue, and amber. It's in Lakshmikant also. Sorry, Vivek Singh, Ramesh Singh. All Singhs only. It's in Ramesh Singh also. You can open Ramesh Singh and WTO chapter. You will find the green box, blue box, amber box. Okay. Good Samaritan law. Good Samaritan law is a very simple thing that is for road accident victims. The golden hour is the first 1 hour of accident. If you bring the victims to the hospital in the first 1 hour of the accident, 90% of them can be saved. So Supreme Court then pushed the state to form something called as Good Samaritan law. So government has notified that, but there is lack of awareness. There is lack of awareness. Most people don't even know that there is something called as Good Samaritan law. That means if you take an accident victim to the hospital authorities cannot force you to disclose your name. They cannot collect money from you. They cannot even collect personal details from you. You can just drop him and go away. If you voluntarily want to, you can give them. They cannot harass you. They cannot call you as a witness. They cannot call you for police station. All these things are mentioned in the Good Samaritan law. But the lack of awareness both on the people side, hospital side, and police executive side, right? So that is leading to still the fear that if we see accident victims, we don't touch them because of all these complications. So right now what government is trying to do is create a statewide Good Samaritan law where people will be rewarded or appreciated through certificates, and per annum 10 people will be celebrated as a national level heroes. Just like the Bravery Child Awards, we will have Good Samaritan Awards. Through this, people will come to know, okay, this is an act, so even I can do the same thing and help more people. So it's an incentive to create a moral society and spread the awareness for the law. Okay. Personally speaking, I always discourage monetary rewards for incentivizing the behaviors, but system sometimes work through monetary rewards. Clear, simple and straightforward argument. So many people are dying in the roads. We have to help them. The only way is to give some monetary value. At least because of this, more awareness will be generated. More people will be discussing about what is Good Samaritan law. Yes. Then whenever someone receives a reward, we'll also keep reminding people that there is some kind of provision. Yes. Zero tolerance enforcement means you have to, again, same thing. If someone is harassing someone because you got some accident victim to the hospital, if you are harassed, okay, then next time you won't help anyone and it will act as a negative publicity, right? So we have to be zero tolerance. That means we should not have any scope for such kind of misuse or abuse of the power. If it has to be implemented in letter and spirit. See again, in this particular context, zero tolerance can be in both sides, whether in Good Samaritan law or in traffic laws. See, accidents happen in multiple dimensions, right? For example, the design of the road, there is a junction. That junction is designed very badly. Or a municipal tree is supposed to be there. The tree is covering the shadow and it is creating a blind spot. Enforcement. Traffic constable caught you. Your lorry is not having proper brakes. RTO caught you. Your lorry is very old. You are not repairing it. He took some bribe and let it go. That might lead to an accident. Or you are carrying more load than you should carry. So all such things also lead to accidents. Zero tolerance. For example, if a lorry driver is not supposed to drive continuously for more than 8 hours, but in reality they drive for 12-14 hours, and sometimes they will be driving in a sleepy mode and all those things, right? So that also lead to accidents. So zero tolerance should be at that end also. Okay, and in Good Samaritan law also we have to implement it in zero tolerance way. If you are harassing someone, then what is the point? Clear? So here mostly he is talking about the road safety enforcement in zero tolerant way. In Hyderabad also, if you see, more people will be traveling on the wrong side of the road. Yes, sir. They can get away with it. Yes. There will be no parking board and people will be parking under it. Challan will come to my home and challan will keep on accumulating. But somebody should have zero tolerance towards all such activities, right? If you have more than 3 challans on the same place related to no parking, your bike should be seized. So that is zero tolerance. And let's say in the traffic signal you have a line, okay, but we'll park on the zebra crossing. We should stop at the line, not on the zebra crossing. If you cross the line itself, that is not tolerable. We should fine them. Okay, then everybody will automatically stop on the line. So we might be negligent 1%. That 1% is leading to a lot of negligence elsewhere. So if you stop the small, if you implement the small laws properly, big laws will automatically be implemented betterly. Clear? Yes. Jugaad should go away and corruption should go away. That's the only thing. Yes. Anything else? I will try to send you the green box, blue box, amber box. I haven't created a PDF due to lack of time. So I will add the version PDF. Yesterday PDF I have shared you. Are you reading this PDF or collecting? Material collectors, not district collectors.
One planning article.
Which one? Below. Abdul Razak Gurna won literature award for Nobel Prize.